Okay, so when we're looking at purchasing an investment property, it doesn't really matter which strategy we're going for. It can be family let, vanilla buy to let, it can be for serviced accommodation, it can be for an HMO. Now obviously for each different strategy there are different sets of rules involved to make sure that your investment is going to be profitable, and those are covered elsewhere. But one thing which is common to all deals is the 4 property investment profit levers. The first of these levers, profit lever number 1, is discount, and we'll look at them in a bit more depth in a few moments. But basically it's possible to buy a property at below the market value, so you're effectively getting a discount, and that means that on the day you buy it you've actually got equity already in the property, which is a good thing to have. Profit lever number 2 is cash flow, and cash flow is the money that comes in from revenue. So if we stick with buy to let for our illustrations here, it's easier. It's basically the cash you're left over with after all the bills have been paid. So if it's buy to let, you've got mortgage interest, you need to have a provision for maintenance, and you'll probably have letting agents fees as well as other minor costs. So cash flow is the amount of money you've got coming in after expenses. Profit lever number 3 is capital growth. Now, as you've probably seen elsewhere, the capital growth, or the growth in house prices, has actually been measured with reliable data since 1871, and the average over those 150 plus years has been 7.9%. So obviously we select our properties to be in an area where capital growth is to be expected, and as I say, the UK average 7.9%. And the 4th profit lever is refinancing. Because most mortgage lenders are willing to lend up to 75% of the value of an asset, then as that asset appreciates, the amount they're willing to lend also increases. Now obviously this is subject to there being sufficient cash flow, for instance, and rent increases are a good indicator. But yeah, refinancing is another way in which we can increase and use the profit on our investments. Okay, so let's have a look at the first profit lever number 1, which is discount. So we've got our house here, which is already let out. It's a buy-to-let investment for somebody, and if we look on the open market, we find that similar properties in the same area in good condition are selling for £150,000. So that's our achievable open market value if we don't alter the house in any way. Now sometimes you'll find that for various reasons, and these may include what we know as the seller's particularly motivated to sell. They might be an accidental landlord, they might be a retiring landlord, they might be a fed up landlord. All the recent changes have made it quite difficult for some people to continue as landlords, and they'd rather get out. But for whatever reason, they're prepared, in order to get a quick sale, they're prepared to sell at a discount. Another occasion when you may receive a discount is if the house isn't in tip-top condition and it needs some repairs or significant refurbishment to bring it up to the standard of other properties in the area. Okay, so let's say in this example, and it is only an example, it's not a case study, it's just intended to illustrate the concept, but we're managing to purchase the house at a £30,000 discount, which that's 20% of the open market value. So this property is often known as a 20% below market value BMV property. So the price we're actually going to pay is £120,000. Now we're going to fund this £120,000 with a mortgage, and typically lenders will go to 75% of the valuation or the purchase price, whichever is the lower. So in this case we're buying for £120,000, so the lender will fund up to £90,000 of that purchase price, and the investor needs a deposit of £30,000, so 25% of the purchase price. Okay, so there are various fees and costs around the purchase of a house. We won't necessarily cover them all, but typically you're going to have your legals, so that's your solicitor's fees, maybe a mortgage broker fee, maybe survey fees. For this example we're going to use £5,000 as the amount there. Now this particular house, we're assuming we've bought it at below market value because it needs a bit of refurbishment doing, and the refurbishment costs are coming in at £10,000. So the total amount of money which the investor needs in order to purchase this property is a £30,000 deposit, £5,000 in legals and £10,000 in refurb costs. So the total capital expenditure to purchase the property for the investor is £45,000. Quite an important consideration in evaluating our deals is the equity that's left on completion. Now, one of the benefits of discount is an immediate increase in the equity of the property as soon as you've bought it and finished any refurbishment. Right, now once everything's done and dusted, the refurbishment's completed and the house is ready for letting, the situation basically is that the investor has invested £45,000. He now effectively owns a property worth £150,000 on which he owes a mortgage outstanding of £90,000. So we have the value of the asset is £150,000. The money owing against the asset is £90,000. So we have a remaining equity which belongs to the investor of £60,000. And just to show that discounts aren't always totally necessary, let's assume we still paid £120,000 for the house, but it's actually only worth £120,000. So we paid full asking price. So no discount was received, but still the purchase price is £120,000. So the mortgage remains the same, £90,000. The investor deposit remains the same, £30,000. Legals remain the same, £5,000. Now we'll assume there's no refurb associated with this one because we're buying the house at top price. So the total investor capital expended on this particular scenario, £35,000, and the investor equity on completion and after refurb is £30,000. So the interesting thing to note here, the effect of the discount has been because the house was bought for £120,000 but is now worth £150,000, then the equity, the investor's equity, which initially would have been the deposit, £30,000, is actually increased to £60,000. So that's the benefit of achieving a discount on purchase, is you get an initial boost to the equity you have in the property, which is very handy later on when we look at profit levers 3 and 4. So just to summarise, discount, nice to have but not always essential, and it only pays you once. So you get your value of your discount on purchase and then that's it, it's not repeated at all. Right, so we come on to profit lever number 2, which is cash flow. Now this is vital because if you don't have positive cash flow, then that means you're taking money out of your pocket every month to keep your investment going. It's no longer an asset, it's a liability. So anyway, once again, it's not a case study, it's based on figures designed to illustrate the concept. So don't get too hung up on the figures. When we package deals, we look at all the figures and make sure that they meet all the required rules before offering the property to investors. So okay, we're looking at rental income on this house. Don't forget we've bought it for 150 grand, £700 a month. Right, now the mortgage, initially we're illustrating this at 4%, which is probably considerably more than a lot of people are paying at the moment, but we do have to err on the side of caution, and in a little while, just to show you the effect, we'll just do it with a slightly higher mortgage rate. But for now, mortgage interest, because we're on a £90,000 interest only mortgage, so the mortgage interest £300 a month. Now maintenance, obviously you're not going to have to pay out on maintenance every month, the things tend to come few and far between, but £80 a month is a good budget to cover the requirements that you can expect. Next regular outgoing, if you're employing a letting agent, is your letting agent fees. These vary, and as with everything else, the more you pay, generally the better service you get, but 10% is a good average. So £700 rental income, they charge a percentage of that. So we're looking at £70 a month to the letting agent. And of course you need to have the appropriate insurances, both buildings and landlord liabilities and contents as required. Okay, so in this scenario, this gives us total outgoings a month of £465. So cash flow is the difference between income, £700, and outgoings, £465. So this property is showing a positive cash flow, £235 per month. Now, as I say, it's always prudent to allow for the worst case scenario. Now, there's not many people who think that interest rates are likely to go above 6% in the predictable future. So if our mortgage was interest only at 6%, that would mean our mortgage payment would be going up to £450 a month, which would increase our outgoings, increases our total outgoings to 615 now. Obviously maintenance, letting agent fees and insurance aren't going to change just because the mortgage interest rate changes, thus reducing our cash flow to £85 a month. But it is still positive, and we have an in-house rule that it needs to be greater than £50, so those rules are still satisfied. So to summarise cash flow is essential because it means then that the investor does not need to dip into their own funds to keep things going, and cash flow also pays you for life. Obviously if you get rid of the property you stop earning the cash flow on it, but that's not recommended. So profit lever number 2, cash flow. I also find a good cash flow is necessary when we come to looking at profit lever number 4, refinancing. Okay, so profit lever number 3 and actually the most significant part of the profit is capital growth. Now if you go back and check the figures, and academics have done that using the electronic database kept by the Land Registry since the 90s, and going back beyond that, the paper records of insurance companies and mortgage lenders, and then right back as far as 1871, data gathered from the national censuses. So reliable data has been analysed, and it's found that over the 120 odd years since 1871, the average house price growth in the UK has been 7.9% compounded. So what this means is that on average, every year the value of your house will increase by 7.9%. So our house starts off worth 150,000 once all our refurb and everything is completed. Now to add 7.9% to that, it's we basically multiply by 1.079, press equals. So that is the value of our house after 1 year after completion. It's gone up to 161,850. Now the next year it will increase by 7.9% of the new total. So what we get, if we look at the next 10 years, so that's the end of year 1, this is the end of year 2, this is the end of year 3, this is the end of year 4, this is the end of year 5, this is the end of year 6, this is the end of year 7, this is the end of year 8, this is the end of year 9, this is the end of year 10. Okay, so after 10 years, with the value of your investment growing at 7.9% compound, which I remind you is the historic long-term average, your £150,000 house is now worth £320,852. Don't worry about the figures after the decimal point, they're only pennies, far too accurate for our means. But look at it another way, the value of our house has actually more than doubled in 10 years. So that's a point worth remembering for later on. So if we plug the figures from our calculator into this slide here, okay, we have an initial house value of £150,000, and the initial investor equity within that £150,000 was £60,000. So that's the amount of the property that the investor actually owned. After a year, the value of the house has increased by £11,850. Now, because the mortgage remains at £90,000, that hasn't changed, and because the mortgage lender has no interest in the increased value of the asset, all they're interested in is getting their interest and receiving their mortgage loan back at maturity, then that all belongs to the investor. So the investor's equity after 1 year is now 71,850. Similarly, after 3 years, and you'll see why we've chosen 3 years when we come on to profit lever number 4. And after 3 years, the investor's equity in the property has grown to £98,432. And after 10 years, with the value of the asset more than doubling, but the loan against the asset remaining where it is, the investor's equity has increased to £230,853, assuming he hasn't done anything with all that extra money at his disposal. So just to summarise, capital growth, because the mortgage lender has no interest in nor claim on the increased asset value, all capital growth belongs to the investor, and this effectively pays the investor forever. Okay, so the fourth profit lever is refinancing. So what do we mean by refinancing? Well, if we cast our minds back to the original purchase you'll remember that we borrowed £90,000. So that was 75% of the purchase price, which was £120,000. And then we went on to show that the value of the house increased from £150,000 after completion and refurbishment. In 3 years, it increased to £188,432 at the 7.9% that compound growth that we've discussed earlier. Now, because the value of the asset has increased, then your mortgage lenders are prepared to look at lending more money on it. Generally, by remortgage, you can get further advances, but we'll look at remortgages. And as things stand at the moment, we're looking at remortgaging up to 75% of the valuation. So if we accept that the 188,432 is the true value of the property, and the lenders accept that, then you can go and remortgage and get a new loan against the property of £141,324. That's 75% of the valuation. Now, that never gets out for naught, as we say up here, so obviously your original mortgage, that has to be repaid, and the solicitors will deal with that as we, as part of the process. So from your £141,324, £90,000 goes back to your original lender, and that mortgage is now paid off. And obviously there are fees involved in the process. You need professional involvement, and I'm just going to estimate them at £3,000 for this example. As I said before, this isn't a case study. We're just illustrating some concepts. So from your 141,324, the total of 93,000 in this example goes to other places. But I'm sure it won't have escaped your notice that leaves a surplus. So if we take the 93,000 away from the remortgage amount, we're left with £48,324. Now, this is effectively cash in your bank. It's not taxable because it's not income, it's not revenue, it's a loan. You've borrowed the money, so you can do what you wish with it, basically. So you have now got from a property which you purchased using £45,000 of your own money, if you remember, with the deposit and the various other costs. And you have now withdrawn from that property £48,324 to do with as you wish. So what do you wish? Well, let's just have a look at a summary of what refinancing is. So by refinancing, as I said, you've now taken all your original investment of £45,000 out, and you now control an asset worth nearly £200,000, but at no net cost to yourself. You don't have any of your own money left in that property, although you do control it and you own all the equity that you hold in it. So the equity obviously is the difference between the value of the property at any point in time and the amount of the mortgage outstanding on it. So what are you going to do with this £48,000? Well, if your goal is to build a portfolio, which is what we advise if you want to create real wealth, 25% of £188,432, which we can assume to be the purchase price of your next house, because obviously all the other houses similar to the ones you bought will also have gone up in value. So 25% of that new purchase price is, surprise, surprise, £47,108, which is less than the amount of money you've just freed up. So basically, if you're looking to build a portfolio, this is the money for your next deposit. And obviously, if you've been following everything, you'll see it will cover all your deposits. It won't cover all your extra costs. You're going to have to find a couple of extra thousand somewhere to purchase your next property. But as you've seen, rinse and repeat. In 3 years' time, not only will you be able to take the money out from your new property in the same way as this one, but there will be another tranche of money available to you from the original property. And indeed, you don't have to wait 3 years. Because you've got two assets increasing in value, then you reach the amount at which you can refinance to draw out the deposit for your third in much sooner than 3 years, if that makes any sense. So, as I say, rinse, repeat, grow real wealth, refinancing pays forever. There you have it. There's your 4 property levers. Just a quick recap. Discount pays once only. It's not strictly necessary, but if you do get a discount, you can see, I'm sure, how it gives you a kickstart on your route to capital growth and eventual refinancing. Profit lever number 2 was cash flow, and a decent cash flow is essential to finance the to ensure that the lenders are happy to refinance for you so you can take advantage of profit lever number 4. And of course, cash flow is essential just to make sure that you're making money, not losing it. Profit lever number 3 is the capital growth, which which, as we've explained, can be, on average, throughout the UK, we expect it to be 7.9% compound year on year. And profit lever number 4, refinancing. So you use that capital growth to finance further purchases, build your portfolio, and obviously the more properties you bring into your portfolio, the quicker they will earn enough to go and buy your next one.